All right, folks, let's talk some Michigan football on a Friday before game day. And of course, we got Justin Rowe on the line from Blue by 90. So we don't have a whole lot of time for like some major live stream, but we wanted to invite everybody in here for some comments and questions prior to game number 3, week 3 against Connecticut. And Justin, of course, we want the full breakdown on the mighty Huskies of UConn and a full depth chart rundown, personnel breakdown on the Huskies. Of course, that's why we've got you here.
That's right. Yeah, I've done plenty of research, and I can tell you, best team in the country. Michigan's non-conference scheduling is top tier. They're just playing the best talent out there to get them ready for this Big Ten schedule.
All right, now to the real story. J.J. McCarthy, of course, named the starter after the game against Hawaii. He's been near perfect. He's got the most talent, both running and passing. Now he's showing to be the better player on the field. Is there really anywhere to go with this besides, I guess there can be some level of criticism as to the way Jim Harbaugh handled it, but it's not coming from me because I think he actually handled it well. He gave Cade McNamara his respect in the process, and JJ ends up the starter.
I mean, he gave both guys a real chance against real competition. You can talk about, the level of competition for sure. But he rolled the ball out there and said, you both get a shot. Here you go. So I'm with you, Mark. I don't know that the criticism of how he did it is real. I think that he basically, said they're neck and neck. We have two really great quarterbacks, and said play it out. So the only thing that I would say is, like, if you wanted to say, some people are assuming that JJ had the whole job, had the job the whole time. I don't agree with that. But if you think that, then you would say, okay, Jim Harbaugh could have let Cade transfer out before the season and figure it out. But from everything that I know, Cade played really well throughout the summer, throughout training camp. JJ was injured during the spring and everything like that. And Cade held on to that starting job, and was vying for that opportunity. And so the thing was, JJ got his chance. JJ played literally as well as you possibly could and made it undeniable for Jim Harbaugh to name him as the starter. And we all saw it play out in real time. So I don't understand really the argument against how it all went.
Regardless of what the limitations are on Cade McNamara's abilities and, being an elite or near the elite of college football, there's a different standard for quarterback play, but he had a season that was better than 80 or 85% of the quarterbacks that play college football in the country. The thing that probably didn't hit me until the last couple of weeks was Jim Harbaugh's loyalty to Cade McNamara would be the same loyalty that most head coaches would have for a quarterback who led them to a championship. But I think it was even more pronounced because Jim Harbaugh had a rough 2020. There was a lot of criticism. This was his guy. This is a guy that led him past a lot that was just weighing on his shoulders and hurting his legacy. Ohio State, Big Ten championship playoff appearance that, that's a tough loyalty connection to break. And I don't think that it's been broken now. He just, was faced with a difficult decision because of the talent gap on one side versus the accomplishment and the loyalty side on the other quarterback.
And we all know how loyal Jim Harbaugh is, right? And so that's where I think, I said this during the summer and into fall camp, and I'll say it again. I think Jim Harbaugh lost a lot of sleep this fall over what the heck do I do here, right? I've got this guy that has done no wrong in Cade McNamara for me. He's done everything I've asked for of him. He overachieved for Michigan last year, and so I got to give him his shot. And I think that's where, that's where I think he, in his mind, was like, I am giving both these guys a fair chance going into going into this fall camp and going into the season. And ultimately, on the other end too, he's got JJ McCarthy, who, is all in all the possible guy that takes Michigan over the edge. Right. And so he's battling the two, the angel and the demon type of thing on two shoulders. Right. And saying, how do I go about this? So I agree that loyalty piece of it on the, for Cade McNamara was, I think he wrestled with that for a long time, but ultimately it's undeniable to see what JJ McCarthy brings to the table, and that extra electricity, that extra layer that a D coordinator has to prepare for with JJ. It does take this offense to a different level, and that doesn't mean that Cade McNamara is a bad quarterback. That's what I think is the difference here. It's not an either or situation. And I'll say this forever. I still think that Michigan will need Cade McNamara to step into a spot at some point of this year. I really do believe that be the case. And that's not a shot at JJ either. It's just the fact of 12, 14 games of college football. Shit happens, Mark.
Absolutely. I made the same comment the other day. I said, now the test for Jim is going to be to keep McNamara engaged, involved, confident, because the only one issue in this plan that I could find, and I think I brought it up in our myriad of conversations throughout the offseason, was what if Cade plays great? What if he basically plays the way he did last year, but against really bad teams? In 3 games, he's got 9 touchdowns, no picks, and he's 68%. And how do you bench that guy? Or, right. How do you choose between the two if you're going to be, say, it's based on the resume during these 2 or 3 games and not go back to the talent. But fortunately for Harbaugh, it worked out. McNamara was clearly off his game for a couple games. Maybe he was feeling some pressure. Who knows? We can only speculate there. He didn't play as well, in my estimation, as he did most of last year.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one thing, too, that Jim Harbaugh and this offensive staff, I understand that everyone's looking at, what are you doing for me now? What are you doing for me in these first couple games? They're looking at it. What has he done for Michigan in his 20 career games, right? And so all of last year, all of the spring, all summer, all fall, I think that's what they know what Cade McNamara is capable of. And that's why this went, deep into the season in terms of the quarterback competition. And that's why I think Jim Harbaugh, if there is a scenario down the stretch here that Cade McNamara has to come in, I think Jim Harbaugh will be very confident in Cade McNamara's ability. I do think that there was something off. I think the pressure of whatever it was might have gotten to Cade a little bit, but I think that ultimately he is a big boy. He has felt, let's think about the games last year, the pressure that he felt against Penn State on the road, against Ohio State in the biggest game of 2 decades for Michigan, Big Ten championship, all these things. So he can do that, and he will be able to do that. But right now, you move to JJ McCarthy, and I want to know what JJ McCarthy can do in those spots as well. We know what he can do against Hawaii. We're probably going to see what he can do against UConn. But I'm excited to see what JJ can do once we get into the Big Ten. Once you do play an Iowa team that has – I don't know if their offense is better than UConn, but I know their defense is a lot better than UConn. And I'm excited to see what JJ McCarthy's offense can do against those types of teams.
Yeah, they kind of take incremental steps to the 3 opponents, and then Maryland, probably a middling Big Ten defense, explosive on offense, so they may have to score some points there, but then they ramp up to Iowa, and regardless of what happens with Iowa overall, they have figured out the defense decades ago, and they're good there. So that's going to be quite the challenge and interesting matchup there for JJ. On one hand, it's the typical, what can we take away from a couple beatdowns, but they're expected beatdowns. But at the same time, did you really see anything to be concerned with? They took care of business in a dominant fashion both weeks.
That's what I love about the, you can criticize about Michigan's schedule for sure, but I love when people say that, like, oh, they stink because they played a bad team. Well, they beat the crap out of a bad team too. And honestly, last week they could have scored 100 if they really wanted to. They called the dogs off and put in the 2s and 3s for the entire second half. So I think they did what they needed to do. What I'm excited and intrigued to see is this defense, right? This defense, both offenses of Colorado State and Hawaii were not good. Both quarterbacks were not good, unfortunately, either. And so I'm excited to see what this defense can do and what the secondary can do as well. You add Mike Sainristil to the picture to replace Daxton Hill. Mike Sainristil, up until this Colorado State game, hadn't played a snap on defense in his life, right? And so in a real game. And so how does he play against, some legitimate competition? How do they do? I'm getting sick of saying it, but how do they replace Aiden Ajabo, right? They played 3 freshmen that were the top snap getters on the D line against Hawaii. And so these young guys that are coming in, yes, you can do it against Hawaii, but when you're playing against a really good offensive line, what is that, as a freshman, as a 19-year-old, how do you perform? And the other thing for me too is Junior Closen has played really, really well for Michigan as a linebacker. Nikai Hill-Green has still not been in due to injury. With him coming back, hopefully this week, is this defense take it up a notch and get really polished before they go and play a good Maryland offense?
The name Junior Colson is stuck in my head for a couple of years now because some of your colleagues in Michigan media told me at the time that he was signed that he was going to be a star, that he was going to be a great player in that class. So I thought, okay, let's keep that name in mind. I don't know how many sacks they had last week against Hawaii. Do you remember what the number was?
I'd have to go look it up. I know they had 8, 7
or
8, I believe.
It is billion against Colorado State, 8. Yeah. I was in and out of that game. I got to tell you, I didn't see a play against Hawaii, just better games on. So I was not engaged in the Hawaii beatdown. But could they possibly sack the quarterback? Could they possibly have a better collective pass rush this season?
So I actually do. I think the answer is yes, because here's the thing. If you actually, obviously Aiden Hutchinson himself and David Ajabo himself were incredible. But if you look at it from a team perspective, they didn't have any more sacks as a team than they had in previous years. It was just 2 guys getting the production rather than a whole wide variety of guys. This year, again, it is a by committee, and they've got new guys. They've got, Iabi coming in from Bama and UT Martin, wherever he was. And he's got 1 play, 1 sack, in week 1. Derek Moore is a freshman that came in. He is really good. I talked to an NFL scout that said he could be a top 10 pick by the time it's all said and done. And he's only 2 games into his career. And so I think by committee, they will be better. They aren't going to have somebody that stand out like an Aiden Hutchinson, but I think that as an overall defense, they will be better in terms of getting to the quarterback. And, sometimes, Mark, when you don't have that standout guy, your team as a whole, you work together a lot better because you're not relying on one person. You're making sure that it's different. And that's harder to defend too. When you can't double team one guy and you have to defend it against an entire front, it's tougher if you're the OC.
You see where you can find Justin Rowe on Twitter, Justin Rowe _ and Blue by 90. You still drop that podcast every Monday and Friday, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Every Monday and Friday, folks, get on over there. Check out Justin's work covering Michigan athletics and football first and foremost. All right. Comments and questions. We will take them right here. Any issues in the first couple of weeks in regards to injuries? I didn't see anything that was really obvious.
Yeah, I think that most everybody is in good shape. I know there are questions around Donovan Edwards, and I'm not sure if we'll see him this week. But I'm not super concerned about anything with injuries because if a guy is out this week, you're going to be okay, and you're going to want to rest him anyway. So I wouldn't be concerned for the long run for injuries.
Justin, it didn't seem as though the play calling had anything to do with the quarterback competition. Maybe it did at some point, but it wasn't obvious like, oh, they threw the ball 50 times because they were trying to audition these two guys against each other. It just seemed like they ran their offense.
No, they did run the offense. And to be honest, Cade McNamara did a lot of what he did last year, which was do the right thing, check down, do the conservative play. And that's what he did from what I was told all summer and fall too. It's nothing flashy, but he doesn't let the ball touch the ground usually. And so there were a couple things, I guess, with the offense. I saw a comment on there that he didn't have a chance to throw it a couple times, which is true. There were multiple missed assignments by the offensive line when Cade was in, and it put him in bad situations. It lost momentum of the offense, and it made him have to force things. So I feel bad for Cade in that sense, because it felt like there was it just felt like the offense wasn't operating at the same level when Cade was in as when JJ was in. And obviously, I mean, here's the thing. The crowd loves JJ. There's no doubt about that. And it makes me feel bad about Cade in that sense too, because of everything he brought to the table for Michigan. But there's just a different electricity when JJ runs out there. And I mean, the balls that he was throwing, Mark, were just dimes. Like I said, it was undeniable. He's able to do things that not very many quarterbacks in college football can do when he throws on the run, scrambles. He's putting balls on the dime that I haven't seen many people do.
Got Justin Rowe here from Blue by 90 for a few more minutes to talk Michigan football. Leave your comments and questions there. We'll have Michigan post game right here at the Voice of College Football after the UConn game on Saturday. So that is the one reason to even watch this game outside of Michigan, Maize and Blue Nation, is to see how JJ performs with the starting quarterback job. And he's going to have to make adjustments at halftime and kind of go through the entire process of being a starting quarterback from first play to last play. So that will be intriguing there.
Yeah. I almost like, weirdly enough, I want them to get into a bad spot at some point, right? Like in a game against UConn, I know they're going to win, right? But I want to see them like, let's get him into a 3rd and 12 and see how it goes. Let's back them up on the goal line or something like that, and see how it goes, because that's where your money is made, right? It's not when it's 1st and 10 and you have all the time in the world to throw a ball. A lot of quarterbacks can do that, but it's when you're struggling is what I want to see from them. Which, by the way, so oddly enough, Michigan against Hawaii only had two sacks. So not quite on pace to have 8 a game anymore, but still, I think that, like I said, they called the dogs off as well in the second half too. So
tough to get too many sacks. Excuse the phone call. Tough to get too many sacks when I can't get to it. Tough to get too many sacks when there's a ton of 3 and outs. So there's only so many opportunities when they're not taking a 12-play drive. To get back to the treatment of Cade, and I'm not piling on Michigan fans because I just think sports fans, college football fans are generally the same. You've got your different portions in every fan base. You got your reasonable, rational people. You got your jerks. You got your delusional fans. You got every. So the way he was treated, I didn't hear it, see it firsthand. I heard about it. We saw the same thing with Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma when they wanted Caleb Williams. We've seen it a zillion times. So it's not necessarily a knock on Michigan fans per se, but was it fairly pronounced, the criticism, the ridicule, the booing, the we want JJ, all those sorts of calls from the crowd?
Here's the thing. It was mostly drunk students. That's what it was. I was there, And it was not as loud. It was annoying, but it wasn't as loud as people want to say it is. It was drunk students that were there. And honestly, how I felt that it wasn't booing Cade. It was booing that like JJ wasn't on the field for them to see the show continue. So that's what it was more. It wasn't that they were, they were like, no, we don't want Cade in this game. It was more so they love to see what JJ does with his arm. And it was fun to watch, and they wanted to see more of it.
Has there been a player or two on either side of the ball that stood out to you beyond the obvious guys in the first few games?
I would say, one of the guys that stood out to me, I already talked about him, was Mike Stainer still on the defensive end, and in the secondary. We didn't know what he was going to be. Switched from wide receiver to safety this past year with an unbelievably crowded wide receiver room. And he's come on, and I think Harbaugh said it, he's making veteran plays already. And so he is very athletic, has played well. DJ Turner's been playing great alongside him. I'm excited about him. The one thing, actually, a surprising interior group that's not playing ultimately well is the offensive line. They did have some missed assignments. You lose Andrew Vistardis, who was a walk-on turned captain, unbelievable leader. He was the leader of that offensive side of the ball. But you replace him with Olu, who is, was an All-American last year, Remington Award finalist. So you thought that was going to be. I think they've got a little bit of figuring out to do still. I don't think it's like a super concern, but you just thought that they would be polished right away. I see the comment about Roman Wilson right here. Through 2 games, I believe he has 4 touches and 3 touchdowns. So we got to figure out how to get him the ball a little bit more. But a lot of guys, I believe. So the stat in the first game against Colorado State was 15 different guys caught a pass, which is incredible. And nobody had more than 2 catches on the day. So they're spreading the ball around. Like I said, it's a loaded wide receiver room. They're trying to get everybody involved early. And then I think this is what we see every year. Everyone gets involved, and then by the end of the year, you've got your main characters that get most of the targets. So one guy that got a lot of run last year with Ronnie Bell out, now with Ronnie back, hasn't gotten much, is Andrell Anthony. Freshman that came onto the scene right away in that Michigan State game, and more. And, I'm wondering, how do we see more of him? So it's some interesting pieces there that Michigan's got to figure out down the stretch here.
4 touches, 3 touchdowns, 1 play, 1 sack. Yeah, those are good ratios. Those will work, definitely. You kind of touched on this, so you kind of stole my final question of the day. Right. But if you've got anything else on the wide receiver core, because I was a bit curious about the way, because of it being maybe the deepest room, in recent history, maybe ever, at Michigan, how you thought that was going to play out in regards to distribution, targets, the whole deal.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, in my opinion, what they should do, and this is a lot easier said than it is done, but it's pick 3 or 4 and run with it, right? Because they've got 2 really good tight ends in Eric Hall and Luke Schoonmaker as well that get targets too, so you can't forget about them. But it seems like how they're doing it is just rotating these guys all the way through. And you've got AJ Henning, Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson, Ronnie Bell. You keep it rolling. And like I said, Andrell Anthony, Darius Clemens is a freshman that it would play at most other Big Ten schools outside of, Ohio State, Michigan State, probably right away. And still, it isn't getting any snaps. But I think that I see them continuing to do what they're doing right now. Would I do that? No, I would like to get some rhythm with my top 3-4 guys, but it definitely seems like they're still going to keep going by committee and getting everybody involved in this.
Justin Rowe, blueby90.com. You see the destination right there for football, Michigan football coverage. we got a chance to flag down Justin, and we just wanted to pop on here and get everyone the opportunity to talk some Michigan football before game number 3 against UConn. We're doing some live call-in show and Florida State post after the Florida State game tonight, and we got Michigan post after the game tomorrow. Again, blueby90.com. Justin, we always appreciate you taking the time out for us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you.